If you read any of the big books about scriptwriting for movies, the thing they pretty much always say is that it's the middle act of a film that's the hardest. The opening is just your setup. If you know your ending, getting that right's a doddle. The ending itself should also be easy if your beginning's up to snuff. But that middle section of a film, that blank yawning space, is what separates the great screenwriters and directors from the good. The latest superhero movie to bludgeon its way onto our cinema screens, the third film in the Venom franchise, Venom: The Last Dance, is written and directed by Kelly Marcel, and it's the perfect example of this middle act problem, because the second act of Venom: The Last Dance is pretty damn terrible. What's it all about, though? Well, the movie continues the story of Eddie Brock, a journalist come superhero, and his symbiote, alien co-hero Venom, both played by Tom Hardy. On the run after the events of the second film, Eddie and Venom make their way to New York City to clear their names as suspects for the murder of cop Patrick Mulligan, played by Stephen Graham. Little do they know, though, that another alien creature known as Xenophage has begun tracking them on behalf of its overlord and creator of the symbiotes, the evil Null, voiced by Andy Serkis, who believes they have a MacGuffin that will help free him from his prison. Don't worry if your brain's starting to get scrambled, I won't go into too much detail on this, the story is as silly as they always are. All this ruckus draws the attention of Area 51 soldier Rex Strickland, played by Chiwetel Ejiofor, and Dr. Teddy Payne, sounds like a dodgy children's toy, played by Juno Temple, who also start their search for Eddie and Venom. Can the duo avoid everyone chasing them on their journey to New York City? And is there a little more to Patrick Mulligan's death than meets the eye? There's no doubt that Venom: The Last Dance has a solid cast of actors to bring his story to life. Hardy, Ejiofor, Temple, Gardner, Serkis, that's a lineup that will get bums on cinema seats. But so many of them are wasted here. Andy Serkis, particularly as the imprisoned Null, hardly has a line. Juno Temple is as interesting to watch as she always is, but she spends most of her time looking through glass containers at swirling goo. It's hardly riveting. Stephen Graham, a superb actor, sits in a cage for most of the film, and it's only really Tom Hardy who gets to sort of stretch his legs. I've always thought his voice for Venom, just a stone's throw from Bane, sounded a bit silly, but you can't deny that Hardy is at least interesting to watch in whatever he does. Even in a film like this, which is a waste of his talents really, he doesn't phone it in. He's not generic. You can tell he treats the role with the same care as his others, and his Eddie is twitchy, nervous, sarcastic, funny, and even has a few emotional scenes towards the end of the film, believe it or not. It's not a masterclass, don't get me wrong, but I'd far rather watch Tom Hardy twitching and gurning through this than Jason Momoa smiling his way through another Aquaman. Those emotional scenes I mentioned, I have to say, point to one of the only things that's really good about Venom: The Last Dance, and that's the relationship between Eddie and Venom. I didn't really notice it as the film was going on, but by the climax when all the chips are down, I actually cared what happened to them. There are some touching moments between them, some funnyish moments, and some jokes that really don't land either, to be fair, but we'll gloss over them. The relationship almost reminded me of something like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which I know sounds silly, but I mean it in the sense of them being a couple who've spent a long time together and show it. It's believable, I guess is what I'm saying, because it's had the time to develop. You can't say the same for any of the other characters in the film, who are so 2D they might as well be Mario or Sonic. In fact, those characters probably had more depth to them in their own movies. Unfortunately, these superhero films have to spend at least half their runtime on action sequences, so there just isn't enough left to produce real characters with hopes and dreams beyond anything simple. That's why, by the way, you have these huge cinematic universes, because it lets the filmmakers build relationships between films. So what you get in, let's say, Ejiofor's Strickland or Temple's Dr. Payne is nothing more than a cardboard cutout. Boring. Setting characters aside, this is a superhero movie, a theme park ride at the cinema, so how does it all look? Well, I'm afraid to say it has the usual Marvel, plasticky, too clean smear that's just dull and devoid of life. The CGI is mostly okay, the aliens look real enough, and everything with Venom looks fine, but one section did stand out to me about halfway through, where Eddie and Venom are escaping down a river that looks like it came from the bargain bin of CGI, last year's stock reduced to clear. As alluded to at the start of this review though, the pacing, structure and script of Venom: The Last Dance are where it really falls down. It starts reasonably enough, after the first scene at least, which was very strange indeed and reminded me of an advert for cocktails, setting the story going. But that middle act, boy is it devoid of ideas. It's pretty clear that the story writers had an ending in mind for The Last Dance, but when it came to adding in meaningful story in the middle to get our characters there, they just didn't have anything. Most of the second act is Eddie and Venom walking across a desert, then ending up at Vegas and going to a casino. There's no real reason for any of this. It's not to meet someone who might help them or infiltrate an enemy's base. It's just movie time killing, and it's the surest sign you'll ever find of a poor scriptwriter. If you think of a movie being like a tent with each big moment as one of its poles, let's say the opening scene, the midpoint, the all is lost moment, the climax, they all need something robust. Venom, The Last Dance, just opts to sag in the middle instead. As I've said, some of the humour lands and some is awful. The dialogue ranges from lovely, like I say every now and then it'll throw in a thoughtful line, to atrocious buckets of exposition that inexplicably get repeated only 5 minutes later just in case the audience missed it the first time. Most of this goes to Tom Hardy too, who does his best to salvage it, but he can't work miracles. Look, this is not a film without some merit. There are moments that work. The last sequence flows nicely, for instance, but there are so many more that just don't. I'd still probably take it over some predictable Marvel slop. At least it has some rough edges, some odd performances to admire. But when your middle section is just a man walking through a desert, then going a bit loopy on a fruit machine, I think I can comfortably say give this one a miss if you're not heavily invested in the series. Now, Tom Hardy, go and make some good movies again. Anyway, nothing more to say. This is Movie Maverick, signing out.